Hello and welcome to the Learn English Football Podcast with me, your host, Tom. And
Tim. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Tim, how are you?
Good, good. The transfer window has just closed.
Yes, it has. That's big news. Is that what we're going to talk about on this episode?
It certainly is. It certainly is. Things were happening last night. It's always a strange thing, transfer deadline day. It always slams shut. I've heard it said that it never shuts slowly. It always slams shut. It's a window. To slam a window shut, Tom, what does it mean?
If you slam something, it shuts really fast. It really hard, often by accident or because you're angry. You do it with a lot of force.
Exactly. So jumping straight in, let's get straight on and talk about this transfer window, Tom. £2 billion sterling has been spent by Premier League sides. It's a lot of money. So there's a lot of players to talk about. We're going to talk about the ethics of that money a bit later, but I'm sure all of our listeners will be keen to hear about some of the players. So, Tom, what do you think about the biggest? When I say biggest, the most impactful, the best signings have been in the Premier League. I've written down a few names. What's the first name that comes to your head?
When you said biggest, I immediately thought of Anthony moving from Ajax to Manchester United. I believe the fee was somewhere around 80 or 90 million pounds, I think.
Yeah, I think it's 100 million euros. I think it's
Oof.
86 million pounds. So yes, I think he becomes the second most expensive player in Premier League history, and certainly
Well,
Ajax's most expensive ever sale.
on this podcast last season, we raved about Anthony a lot playing for Ajax, and he is a flair player. What's a flair player?
A flair player is someone who's exciting to watch, someone who's maybe unpredictable, someone who's got like a creative side to their game.
Exactly. He's able to bring an element of skill and as you said, unpredictable, unexpected tricks to his game. So I think he will be very, very popular with the Man United crowd, and I think he will sell a lot of shirts. Do you think he'll make a big impact on the field?
Well, it's interesting. I know you've always been a fan of Anthony. I heard of Anthony through you, actually, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners did, actually. So it's interesting that he's now taken the step up to kind of world fame. I think it's a difficult transition. He only scored 7 goals or 8 goals last season in Ajax. I think he wasn't prolific. There weren't too many more assists. But as you say, people who watch him play says he's often the person who creates the space, maybe the pass before the assist, someone who often breaks the play. And what I mean there is when, like, instead of it being controlled tactical play, when they kind of beat a man or play an incisive pass that creates space, that makes the defense shift around and move around and become uncomfortable. So I think Anthony does have that ability, but as I'm sure has been asked a lot of times, can he do it on a cold Tuesday night in Stoke? And that is the question for any Brazilian winger, a flair player. It's always a tricky transition to the Premier League. 100 million it's a big price tag. It's a lot of pressure on his shoulders. So I'm going to say that I think it's going to be difficult for him. I think he's probably got the talent from the little I've seen, but I think psychologically and in this United side in a very fragile state, I think it could be difficult. I think there have been some big signings in East London this transfer window, Tom. Would you like to break the big special news to some of our listeners?
Yes, all of us West Ham fans are extremely excited about our new Brazilian midfielder, Paquetá, who has joined us from Lyon. Previously, he'd come from AC Milan, and he'd come from one of the big clubs, either in Sao Paulo or Rio. I don't remember which one. But he is a regular in the Brazilian national team. He seems to be able to play as a deep-lying midfielder or further up as an attacking midfielder. So I expect Moyes to play him in a triangle just in front of Declan Rice and Thomas Souček. And I think he will have a big impact. And as I mentioned about Anthony, he will also sell a lot of shirts for the club as well.
He certainly will in your fancy relatively new stadium. I do wonder about his position, though, Tom. I've read a lot of West Ham fans say exactly what you've said. He'll play just in front of Declan Rice and Souček. Now, I don't think he is that player. I think he is the Declan Rice position. I think he's going to play alongside Declan Rice and maybe create a bit of competition for places in that position. So I think you're maybe only going to see two of the three of Souček, Rice, and Paquetá at
You
any
could
one
well be
time.
right. But when we have a campaign with the European games and the league games, that's not a problem if we drop one of those three players and we have two of them as the base players. And then we of course have players like Ben Rama or Lanthini who can play in front of them.
Okay. Talking about big signings, and in terms of this, will definitely be one of the biggest in terms of the emotional desire and emotional passion, the passion that it inspires in the fans of this club, and that's Alexander Isak. I think it's a big, around 75, 65, 70 million euro transfer from Real Sociedad, La Real, as they're called, to Newcastle United, of course, relatively recently bought by Saudi owners, the Saudi Private and Public Investment Fund. And he is their marquee signing for the summer. He is the big man. When I say a marquee signing, Tom, what do I mean? A signing that's a small signing or a big signing that gets everyone's attention?
The marquee signing gets the attention of everyone. Yes, exactly. If it's a marquee signing, then you pay attention, you notice it. And I have to
Yeah.
say, he started fantastically in his first game. He scored a goal. He had another one disallowed, I think, but he showed he is a very, very fast, dangerous player. And I think he will work very well. It seems like he has adapted very quickly to life in the Northeast.
Yeah, a lot of people question the value of the signing, but the price of the signing. But if he scores 15, 20 goals and gets those Geordie fans singing and their hearts racing, then I think it'll be worth every penny. I think at Real Sociedad, maybe his numbers aren't that great, but he was playing on the left in a system that, from what I've read, didn't really suit him too much. And I think being the main man at Newcastle, being worshipped by the fans, I think being striker is an ego game. It's a very psychological position. You have to believe in yourself. And having 60,000 Geordies singing your name. Tom, you went to university, I believe, up in Newcastle, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes.
So you've got a bit of experience of the passion of the club up there. It's a real one club city. It's a religion. And I think he could be not the next Alan Shearer, but if he scores a lot of goals, he'll become almost a mythical figure for those fans. And I think that's going to help him score.
Yes, he's joined them at the perfect time. As you talked about the Saudi owners taking over, it's a club in an upward trajectory. They are moving up the league table. They're playing better football. They showed that they can challenge the big clubs. They have done so far this season. I think they drew with either Man City or Liverpool. I think Man City in one of the games. So he's
Drew
joined
with
at
Man
the
City,
perfect
yes.
time. Yes. So yes, I think he will be very, very successful. I have to say one other player. We talked about Anthony going to Manchester United. I think Casemiro will fit in very, very well there. He's got the experience now to be able to adapt to do that job. We've talked about the problems in the Manchester United midfield with Fred and Scott McTominay, neither of who are quite the world-class midfielders, but I think Casemiro will know what's expected of him, and being, I think, a 4 or 5-time Champions League winner, he can give that extra stability at Manchester United. So I expect him to make a big impact as well.
While I can't disagree with any of your points about Casemiro's quality as a player, I will respond to you in a different category on Casemiro. I don't think he's going to be a great signing, but I feel wearing an Arsenal shirt, it would be dishonest of me, unloyal of me, not to mention Gabriel Jesus as a great signing. He's come in for relatively cheap money. It was only £45 million. He's 23 years old. He's a double Premier League winner. He's a Brazil international. He's been to the World Cup. He's cut his teeth in the Premier League, and what I mean by that is he's gained experience. And I think he's one of these strikers that I think he feels a bit released, having left the highly controlled style of football under Pep Guardiola. And he's given Arsenal exactly what they missed. It's been fantastic having a proper striker who can actually run more than 20 meters, unlike Lacazette. So yeah, I think he's going to be a great signing for us. Tom, I think we should also talk about the big man. 9 goals in 5 games, smashing all records in terms of a fast start. What have we got to say? Is there anything? Are there any superlatives? Is it about Haaland?
He's a beast. He's an absolute monster, not only with his physical size, but his speed, his acceleration is frightening for defenders. So I think we can expect that form to continue as long as he stays fit. When you look at the Manchester City midfielder behind him with players the quality of De Bruyne, Gundogan, Rodri, feeding him Bernardo Silva, one of your favorite players, Jack Grealish. There's so much quality that can deliver him the perfect ball. He doesn't need to have many touches in the game, but when he does touch the ball, it will often be to create a goal-scoring opportunity and put the ball in the back of the net. So I'm certain now, I say certain, I'm very, very confident that he will finish as the Premier League's top scorer.
Yeah, I think I've actually got a little bet on with a friend who's a very passionate Almeria fan who's bet €5 on Darwin Nunez becoming the top scorer. And I backed Haaland, and I think I'm going to win. I also made a separate bet that Gabriel Jesus would score 20 Premier League goals. Both €5, little friendly sportsman's bets. Yeah, I mean, you're a defender, Tom. I'm a defender as well. And, you know, when you come up against a fast striker as a defender, you're like, okay, I'll give him a bit of space. I'll drop a bit deeper to compensate for the speed. But against Haaland, you can't do that because that's just giving him easy ball into feet, which you can't afford to do against Haaland because he'll turn and hurt you. And alternatively, against a slow striker, you'd generally get very tight. But of course, you can't do that because he does have the speed to get in behind you. It's an absolute defender's nightmare. I think you've just got to go into it with your fingers crossed and hope he has a bad day.
Yeah, we'll watch closely and see if a centre back or a fullback does come up with a good tactic to defend against him. And I'm sure all the other Premier League teams will also be watching closely to see how they can stop him.
Okay, so that's good. Tom, now we're going to talk about the kind of the other end of the spectrum, the other end. Some of the signings that we think might not do so well. So yes, I mean, for example, who is going to be this season's Romelu Lukaku, who has failed spectacularly in his move from Inter Milan to Chelsea? I'm going to go out there. I'm going to try and say there's no bias, there's no subjectivity in this. I'm going to say Aubameyang. I don't think he's going to do the business for Chelsea. And there's a couple of reasons I say that. And when I say to do the business, I mean to be successful. Firstly, he's not the player he was in terms of his physicality. 2 seasons ago, he was a much more explosive player in terms of his pace. I think that's a factor. And I also think he needs good service. And I'm not sure that the Chelsea, the attacking midfielders are really on form this season. I mean, you can imagine a front three of Havertz, Aubameyang, and Raheem Sterling. Well, I mean, okay, all of those players have got qualities, but if you're a defender, you'd much rather any of those players than a Haaland or a Gabriel Jesus who you know where the goal is. So I do worry about Aubameyang. I don't think he's going to get the service. I don't think he's get the physicality. They didn't sign Ronaldo apparently because he was unwilling to press. Well, Aubameyang doesn't press. Thomas Tuchel should know this. He has managed him. Chelsea should know this. He has been in the Premier League. So I can't see Aubameyang being a particularly successful signing.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think obviously there is a story in Barcelona recently. His house was broken into. I believe he was attacked. The reason for why he's coming back to the Premier League so soon, obviously he hasn't settled in Barcelona, which is a surprise because he did start very well there. But what we know of Aubameyang is that he goes hot and cold. When he's playing well, he's unbeatable. You want him in your team. He's the first name on the team sheet. But sometimes, towards the end of his time at Arsenal, he falls hopelessly out of form. You see him trying, but everything he tries fails. So it's a big question for Chelsea. What Aubameyang will they get? In form or out of form,
Yeah, I
Aubameyang?
think it's one of the best piece of businesses ever in terms of Barcelona. They bought him for free 6 months ago, and they've sold him for 15 million now, and I think that's why he's leaving, to free up transfer to free up salary for the salary cap for Barcelona. Yeah, I think we must take our hat off to the Chelsea photographer who managed to take a photo of Aubameyang which revealed neither his broken jaw nor his Arsenal tattoo. So fair play to the Chelsea photographer. Good work,
The
creative
jaw
stuff.
is this bone here, isn't it? The jawbone. Yes.
Yeah, the jaw is this bone, yes.
Uh-huh.
And the photo was very tactful. He was kind of had one side of his face facing the
I
camera,
see.
in a kind of
Yes.
quite stylish looking. So Tom, I hear you have got something against Fulham and a couple of their potential flop signings.
Yeah, well, talking of aging attacking players who are coming back, I've noticed that Willian is coming back from Corinthians to Fulham. They've got him on a free transfer, but it already seemed like Willian was well past his best when Arsenal bought him from Chelsea.
Yes, he's a bit like Aubameyang, 2 seasons too late.
Yeah, so
In fact, in a very similar way, it is quite similar to Aubameyang because he's had his family threatened in Brazil because of poor performances at Corinthians, and that's actually why he wants to come back to Europe. So it's actually quite similar to the Aubameyang case. But sorry for interrupting, Tom.
yes, so not only is Willian, he has the smell of desperation about him, but also they've signed Daniel James, the Welsh winger. They've signed him from Leeds. He previously played for Manchester United, previously, I believe, for Swansea. So he's becoming a bit of a journeyman player.
I think he's got a nice expression for him. He flatters to deceive.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of talk about him. He does one or two nice things in a game, but then he disappears. There's no real output. He's got very explosive pace, but I do question his touch, his passing, and his finishing. I think he might be a bit of a Theo Walcott.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so
without the finishing.
These two signings have the smell of desperation that Fulham really feel they need some attacking strength, and they've probably, should we say, cast out their fishing lines into the transfer market, and Willian and Daniel James was the best that they could get. So yes, I'm not too optimistic for them. Neither for his one, Dele Alli, moving from Everton to Besiktas in Turkey. Obviously, Dele Alli needs to revive his career, but he strikes me as a player who needs everything to be in place off the field as well. When he's in form, he's a fantastic player, but we've not seen that form. We've not seen Dele Alli at his best now for a good 3 seasons, and
or even longer.
Even longer. I don't think going all the way to Turkey to try and revive his career is going to be the solution for him. So
yeah, that really does
potential...
smell like it might be a flop for Dele Alli. I mean, he's been poor in his last couple of seasons at,
That's a nice word,
Tottenham.
by the way. A flop, you say? What's a
flop? Yes. Yeah. To flop, if your hand flops, if your hair flops, is to kind of fall because it's got nothing holding it up.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yes, let's move on. Let's talk about clubs overall, Tom. Let's talk about overall, which clubs do you think are going to make significant climbs up the Premier League table this season? I think you've got a small club that maybe might surprise some of our listeners.
Well, there's a few. Obviously, Brighton have been very, very impressive with their start to the season, and I've also been very impressed with their work in the transfer market. Brighton have, for example, bought Billy Gilmore from Chelsea. He's the young Scottish midfielder. He'd previously
been a tidy player, yeah,
been out on loan at Norwich when Norwich were up last season. And Brighton generally are playing very, very well anyway. So I think Brighton will continue their good form. I also think Southampton have made a couple of signings that could help them. I see that their Croatian defender, Kaleta Kar, has come from Marseille for 10 million. And as a result, they've sold on Jan Bednarek, the Polish defender, to Aston Villa, or they've loaned him to Aston Villa. I think that's a good bit of business for them to freshen things up. They've also brought in Ainsley Maitland-Niles, has gone from Arsenal to Southampton on loan. What do you think of Maitland-Niles as an Arsenal fan?
Well, as an Arsenal fan, I can say that he has got ability and he has got physique. He's definitely got a touch. He can pick a pass, and his ability to get up and down the pitch at full speed is right up there. He really is an athlete. I think Ainsley Maitland-Niles' problem is himself. He doesn't want to be the position where he's quite obviously best at. He's best at right back or a right wing back position. And every time he's played there, he's taken to it like a duck to water. And when I say that, I mean, it's an expression. To take to something like a duck to water means to learn to do it very quickly, as if you're a natural. And he looks very strong in that position. He was playing there under Arsene Wenger, under Unai Emery, but he's always wanted to be a central midfielder. We've given him a few limited number of appearances at centre midfield at Arsenal, and he's looked like he doesn't have the big picture of the game in his head. He looks like he's surprised sometimes by pressure, and he doesn't look as if he can organise the game. I think he's just essentially used to having one side of the ball protected by a sideline. But he does have the physical and technical attributes. So I really hope that Ainsley Maitland-Niles listens to his manager and plays at wing back, because, you know, it's not just at Arsenal he's failed as a centre midfielder. He went on loan to West Bromwich Albion in a season when they got relegated, played central midfield for them. Was nothing special. It wasn't their best central midfielder in a relegated side. He went to Roma on loan last season with the intention of playing at central midfield under Jose Mourinho. Couldn't get in the side. So, but there's potential, but I think he needs to play at right back.
Now you tell me. So I discount Southampton. I think at best we're talking mid-table, but Brighton I stand by as my smaller club who will do well this season.
I think
What about
Brighton have
you?
also done an incredible job, because they've sold some big players and they've started the season fantastically. They've sold Yves Bissouma to Tottenham. They've sold Mope to Everton.
That's
I
right.
think they've sold a couple more.
Mm-hmm.
And they've started having a great start to the season.
The fullback who's gone to Chelsea? Cucurella?
Oh, of course, Cucurella, yeah.
Yeah. But Brighton have brought in a fantastic signing, Estupinan. Do you know this player? Estupinan. He's a left back. He's come from a Spanish team, I believe, and he started very, very well for them. So I think they are looking stronger than they have been, but clearly part of it. Yeah, Pervis Estupinan. He's come from Villarreal to Brighton. They've spent 17.8 million. I don't know if that's pounds or euros. Euros.
They've definitely got a great scouting network, Brighton. I think the amount of money they've saved themselves with the scouting network's enormous. So Tom, we're going to move on to surprises. What was your biggest surprise in the transfer window?
The biggest surprise. Well, obviously, as a West Ham fan, you know, I'm going to be biased here, but getting Paquetá was a real surprise. I can't imagine that we were the first team on his list when he thought, I want to leave Lyon. He spoke to his agent, where can I go? And the agent he said, I want to go to West Ham. I can't believe that was how the conversation unfolded. So for me, that was a big surprise that we got a player of such high quality at the peak of his career. I believe he's 25 years old. He's worth 42.5 million euros.
Just to put that in context, there were Juventus were sniffing around, Manchester City were mentioned, Arsenal were mentioned. So yes, there was definitely probably some names on that he asked his agent about before West Ham. I would agree that is a really surprising signing and an exciting one. If I were you, I'd be very excited. I'm going to say that the non-signing, the non-transfer of Cristiano Ronaldo for me was the biggest surprise. It seemed to me quite obvious at the end of last season that all love was lost between him and the United as a club and the fans, at least a vast majority of them. It looks like he's just got nowhere to go. Nobody wants him. His wages are too high. His influence in the dressing room is too strong for someone who isn't going to be the best player in the team. And we've heard him linked with Napoli this week, Atletico at the beginning and the first month of the transfer window. Chelsea dismissed the idea of Ronaldo for his lack of pressing and then went and signed Aubameyang. We've heard him linked with Bayern. We've heard him linked with a romantic return to Sporting Lisbon. Apparently, he would have had to be paid about £30,000 a week to go there, and that would have been, I mean, he's on about £600,000 a week at the moment at Manchester United. And then, of course, for sporting reasons, he turned down a transfer to Saudi Arabia. So I think the biggest surprise is Ronaldo is still at Manchester United. I'm surprised that, for example, Real Madrid didn't look at it and think, you know, we've only got Benzema up front. Why don't we just take Ronaldo on a 1 year deal? Say to Ronaldo, you're going to be substitute. He'd take that just for the opportunity to score a couple more Champions League goals and extend his record as Champions League top scorer, which, let's face it, I think is his solitary motivation still at club football level. So I'm surprised. Did you think he would stay, or did you think he would move as well?
I was expecting Ronaldo to go a couple of weeks ago. I thought that when they got that terrible start, there was clearly some conflict with him and Harry Maguire over who should be captain. Also conflict with the coach. I don't think Cristiano Ronaldo's style is compatible with the Manchester United coach, Ten Hag's style. So I was expecting him to go. Can I just
agree with everything you said up until that last bit, that Ronaldo isn't compatible. I think that Ronaldo's now there. I think he will do everything he can to be as good as he can. I think his sporting professional pride is too great. He's going to want to have a great season, even if it's just a personally great season. He doesn't care about Manchester United, obviously. But if he can bang in 20 goals and maintain some kind of reputation, then I think that would be a massive motivator for him. In terms of our final question, Tom, on the transfer deadline special, desperation. And let's face it, Tom, transfer window can be a desperate time. I think we've all been there, checking our phones late into the night, desperate for a vibration to give us some hope. I remember big transfer deadline deals for Mesut Ozil, for Mikel Arteta, for Mertesacker. And so, yes, and I think I've also can remember some desperate ones as well, like Pascal Sigan, Mustafi. So can you think of any desperate ones, Tom? I'm going to put one in there in the mixer. I'm going to propose one, and I'm going to say Casemiro. This isn't to say he's a bad player. I think he is a good player, but I don't think, I mean, it is desperation. They weren't looking at him in June. They weren't looking at him in July. They lost 2 Premier League games against poor teams, and they went and spent £60 million on Casemiro. They'd spent all summer looking at an attacking 8 position in Frankie de Jong, and they go out and buy a defensive midfielder for the same amount of money, someone who they hadn't been linked with. That is desperation. That's typical United, and we've even got an expression for this: to throw money at a problem. Manchester United are throwing money at the problem instead of brains. Can you think of any other signings that I mean, you could say Antonio is the same, but I'd like to differentiate a little bit with Antonio, just that he's so young that he will have resale value. And he could develop, he could become a better player. Right? I don't think Casemiro is going to become a better player. And I think also you have to question, if you're Casemiro, why is Casemiro left Real Madrid, the most successful club in the past decades, to go to Manchester United? It's not for sporting reasons as well. So again, when you want to buy someone who's obviously going to you for non-sporting reasons, for financial reasons, that also makes the signing even more desperate.
Can I answer that question talking about clubs?
You could talk about clubs. Yeah, Tom. Yes, of course.
I feel that 2 of my favourite England midfielders from the past, Frank Lampard at Everton and Steven Gerrard at Aston Villa, are also a little bit desperate at the moment. Everton clearly have a problem replacing Richarlison, who has joined Tottenham in the summer. They've got the England striker who's always injured, or has been injured a lot recently,
Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
And they've bought, as you mentioned, Neil Maupay from Brighton, but he's not a 20 goal a season striker. They'll be lucky if they get 10 out of him with the way they're playing. I think they have a lot of hopes resting on their young attacking player, Anthony Gordon. Uh, but I feel that Everton seem a little bit desperate.
Yeah, I think Everton's current situation is an accumulation of poor transfer windows, changing managers, giving the new manager some money, sacking him 3 months later,
Mm.
and then you're left with a mixed bag.
So they've
Um,
bought Idrissa Gueye back from PSG for 6 million. He's popular with the fans. I'm not totally convinced by him.
I think
They've
there's a
also,
big difference between Paris Saint-Germain and Everton. I think you can be a flop at Paris Saint-Germain and still be a star at Everton. And I
they've
think that
also
might be the
bought
case for Gay.
a young guy, James Garner, who's basically a Manchester United youth team and B team midfielder. He's joined Everton for 10 million. That seems a huge amount of money, 10.4 million euros for a player who's unproven at Premier League level.
Yeah, I
So,
get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
and
It
and
does.
yeah, as far as Aston Villa go, Aston Villa have brought in Jan Bednarek from Southampton on loan to sturdy up the defence. I think they've got rid of Courtney House. He's gone out on loan. And they've brought in Leander Dendoncker, the Belgian midfielder who's come from Wolves for 15 million. Now, Dendoncker couldn't really get a starting place in that Wolves team in, I think, 2 or 3 seasons he spent there. So I wonder if that valuation is too high and has the smell of desperation again.
Yeah, quite possibly. So overall, Tom, we're going to move on and talk about the transfer window as a league, on a league level as opposed to a club or individual level. The Premier League has spent £2 billion this summer, including performance-related bonuses. It's the highest transfer window in the history of the Premier League, which makes it the highest transfer window in the history of football. And I think that's already quite an eye-opening fact. And when I say an eye-opening fact, it's like, wow, something which makes your eyes open. It is a bit eye-opening. But then when you also combine that fact with the fact that the Premier League has spent more than the Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, and Ligue 1 combined, I think it really makes you think that there are big changes happening in the financial landscape of European football, and that is going to change things. This might be the decade of the Premier League? If you look over the past 10 years, we've had 2 all Champions League, all English Champions League finals, but you've also had 2 all Spanish Champions League finals, and you've also had a lot more Spanish winners. But I do feel that maybe the Premier League has taken a step forward. Now, in terms of, I think in terms of Real Madrid, Bayern, AC Milan, Juventus, they all still have massive appeal, maybe more appeal than some Premier League clubs. But some of the signings that Forest are making, that Crystal Palace are making, that Everton are making, was it the Atletico Madrid player went to Lodi?
Renan Lodi has joined Nottingham Forest on
Has
loan.
joined
That's
Nottingham Forest, trading the
big
Champions League.
signing. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and again, that's for money, Tom. That doesn't. That's. And I read an interview with Simeone saying he's been here for 10 years, and they can't sell players anymore. There isn't a market for selling players in European football. And I've been doing a bit of investigation, and I found that European football's finances have suffered since COVID. When COVID came, their television deals were negotiated down, so they actually received less money than they were originally contracted to receive, whereas the Premier League didn't receive less money. The payment structure was changed, but the final figure will still be the same. And there was already a bit of a difference, and that difference seems to have got bigger and bigger. Tom, is this healthy for European football?
Good question. I think it could be dangerous for having competitive European football. Having said that, the Premier League has been the richest, the most dominant financially for the last 20 years. And still, Spanish teams have done very, very well. And of course, we can't look further than Bayern Munich. We have PSG now, who have the best striking team in the world. So on the one hand, it could be a sign that the balance will be shifting and the Premier League teams will dominate more in European football. To look at
Yeah.
it another way, though, why do the Premier teams have so much money? Well, simply because people are willing to pay more money to watch Premier League football. So it's a reflection of the competitivity of the league. There are a lot more viable teams who can challenge and win the league compared with European other European leagues, and this is also perhaps a reflection on the history of the Premier League, which is a fairly new form of the league. It's got that title for the
30
last
years.
30 years, but league football in England has been going since, I believe, the mid 19th century, so in some form or another. So we can't look past the history that is in English football as well and say that that doesn't play a part.
I think also the priorities of the leagues are quite influential in how we've come to this state of play at the moment. I think in spite of all the rivalry in English football, I think we do love competition in Britain. We in England, in English football, we prioritise that before our club's success. I would much rather Arsenal finish second regularly, or third, or fourth, or fifth, and won occasionally, than to win every season. I don't think that's interesting. Whereas other clubs, maybe I know the Spanish league, when I think essentially it was around the 2005, 2008 periods, TV rights went up a lot all across Europe. More in Premier League, but all across Europe. And the Premier League really focused on distributing that money evenly on a meritocracy basis across the league. So if you did better, you got more money. Whereas La Liga, for example, channeled 50% of all television rights to two clubs, to Real Madrid and Barcelona. And then 50% of all that money to 18 clubs, the rest of the 18 clubs in the league. So much so that Atletico Madrid, in the season they finished first, they've still earned less TV money from La Liga than either Real Madrid or Barcelona. And I think that happened then. It created a more competitive league in the Premier League. And what's really made this problem rubber stamped, reinforced this problem, is that now the next round of television rights have come in, and these international countries are thinking, well, we paid more 10 years ago, and now the difference in product is even bigger, because in these leagues you've got 2 or 3 teams. In this league, in the Premier League, you've got 5 or 6 or even 7 teams. But it's still, so it's not the Premier League which has made the mistake. The Premier League has got here through good business, as you're saying. But the question is, it is unhealthy to have such discrepancy. So, Tom, we don't have much time left. But can you tell me briefly, should UEFA do something about it? Should FIFA do something about it? Should the Premier League governance itself? What do you think?
Well, we see with the American football, they have the franchise system, and the club that finishes last, they will get the first pick of new players. So there you have the NFL stepping in and regulating to ensure that the balance is there. That's true in all of American professional sports. If we were to do that, yes, it would require FIFA or UEFA and the Premier League all to work together to ensure fair play.
What do you think, maybe, that these things happen? Everybody has their time. The Italians had their time in the 90s. Before that, it was the Brits. The Spanish leagues had success. Maybe this is just the Premier League's time. Tom, we've got way less than a minute left on this podcast. I'd like to thank all of our listeners for tuning into the Left Pod transfer window special. The transfer window slammed shut last night. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tom, I think we'd like our listeners to get involved. How can they do that in the conversation?
They can find our Facebook page, Learn English Football Podcast. They can find us on many platforms, including iBox. We've just joined the Spanish platform iBox for listening on the podcast. And we've got a YouTube channel now, Learn English Football Podcast. You can watch us on video.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Tim. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.